Does your Helix ever sound like this? You hear that? What is that? Those little pops in there? Well, that's called digital clipping. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can avoid it. But not only that, before we move on to digital clipping, I also want to bring up a second issue in the Helix world, and that's called digital harshness, or a fizziness that some people experience. And I just want to say that I've experienced both digital clipping and digital harshness or fizziness, and you're not alone. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can avoid all of it. Now, getting back to digital clipping, what is it? Well, it's when an effect is popping or clipping because it can't receive the output from the things before it. Something before it is too loud and it's causing it to clip. So when does this happen, or why does this happen? Well, some people have offered some good advice in saying that our presets are just way too loud, and I agree. We love louder volumes, but there's a principle to follow here. There's a principle when we're making presets that is very easy to forget, but it's very important. It's that louder does not always equal better. Actually, not even always. Louder does not equal better, and let me show you. All right, I've set up a preset that has an A/B test. I want you to tell me which tone is better. Now, if you're like me, I'm always drawn to the louder version, but you may have guessed it, I tricked you. It's the same exact tone. All I was doing was I was bringing up and down the channel volume. You can see here, channel volume is going from 7.5 on this preset down to 6. And so it's the same exact tone. We had the same overdrive going into this Jazz Rivet amp, and nothing changed other than the channel volume. But for some reason, we tend to feel like louder is better, and it's not. So what we do is we start building our presets, and we start adding little things here like a compressor and overdrive, and we start dialing in our tones like we like them. And what we do is we sprinkle a little extra volume here, a little more output here, and before you know it, our preset is way too loud. All right, so that's great, and you now know not to make your presets too loud, but that's not the only problem with digital clipping. Let me show you. Let me go back to our clipping preset here. Now just ignore this last block right here. Let's go to our last engaged block, which is this reverb right here. And let me take down the level like 10 dB. And let's see if we still get digital clipping. It's still there. Our preset volume went down 10 dB, but the clipping is still there because the overall preset volume has nothing to do with the clipping. It's something else. Let me bring it down even further just to do this test. I mean, we are negative 17 dB and we're still getting that clipping. So what else is going on here? Well, the overall volume is not the culprit. What it is, and I'm not very scientific here, but it's the difference between some effects being linear and non-linear. What it is some of the effects in the Helix really respond to too much volume hitting the front of them. And I think these are the non-linear ones, but whether I'm saying that correctly or not, the thing you need to look out for is if the effect has the parameter called headroom. And it's only some delays and very few modulation have this, but if it has the headroom parameter, there's a good chance that you can start hearing some clipping. So I brought in some effects that have this headroom parameter here. The first two delays are the vintage digital. You can see the headroom right here. It's set to 0 when you bring it in stock. Same with the transistor tape. And also I found one, there's the bubble vibrato, also has headroom, and they have it at +3 when you bring it in. So there's two ways to fix this clipping. If you go to the amp block here, to make this a little more dramatic for the video, I increased the channel volume and the master. I don't remember exactly the factory settings on this amp that I brought in, but I increased the channel volume all the way up. Even on these two overdrives that we have, I decreased the gain and I increased the level, which is what I typically do in a real world situation with a pedal board going into an amp. I like to use my overdrives more like boosts, more like clean boost with just a sprinkle of the overdrive saturation to it. So I bring down the gain and hit the front of the amp with more volume. But now we're in the modeling world, so things are a little bit different. So if you're still getting that clipping sound, you need to start backing off these pure volume output parameters, like level here in any overdrive that you see. Really any effect has this level. Most of them do. Editing Jimmy here, real quick, I wanted to clarify one thing. I was talking about pure volume output, which is usually like the level on a parameter, and a lot of the effects blocks have those, but pure volume levels before the amp, like on those overdrive effects, will affect the tone of the amp, because if you slam the front of the amp with more volume, you will also change the tone. So pure volume boosts are going to be after the amp, like with delays and reverbs and even your output block. So yeah, hope that's not too confusing. The reverb you saw me playing with before, those are just pure volume outputs. But here on the amp here, we have channel volume and master. Now master affects tone, it really does. Like if you start backing off the master, it's like bringing less volume into the power amps of like the modeled tube amp. But with the channel volume, it's just pure volume. You can bring that down and see if it helps your digital clipping. So let me bring the channel volume down from all the way up to 5. Now, our volume got less, but also the clipping went away. So it's different than adjusting the volume that went after these non-linear effects, and we're not slamming the front of them, so they're not clipping anymore. But what if there's a different way we want to do it? So let's bring this back up. We probably should still have clipping now. Yep. So these parameters that have headroom controls, that's why they're there. They're there to mimic it even says this in the manual. Let me look it up. Some modulation and delay pedals' internal signal path exhibit a bit of grit, especially when placed after a high gain distortion block. Negative values increase the perceived amount of grit. Positive values clean things up a bit. At 0, the model behaves like the original pedal. Remember, these are models, so they're trying to get them, it's not a mistake. That's all I want to say. It's not a mistake. They're modeled after other pedals. It's just now we're in their modeling world, it tends to give us some things we don't really want. So if I were to decrease this headroom a good bit, our clipping should just be out of this world terrible. There it is. So to fix that, let's bring the headroom all the way up. Now remember, our channel volume and master volume are still up. Let's see if that got rid of the digital clipping or not. I think we fixed it. All right, so that's digital clipping, but what about digital harshness or fizziness that some people experience? In my opinion, this is much more subtle. It's very hard to detect, but it is in there. Sometimes it gets on our nerves. And the way to fix this is with our high cuts. Now, I wanted to make this video in this order because I think a lot of times people are dealing with, like in the forums on Facebook or whatever, or messaging different people, they're dealing with digital clipping, and people are giving them the solution of using their high cuts. No matter how much high cut you apply to your preset, it's never going to fix digital clipping. That is for solving the problem of digital harshness that I'm gonna show you in a minute, but let me show you, we'll get this preset to clip again, and then I'm gonna start adding some high cuts to it. That's not gonna fix anything. So we'll bring our headroom back down to about 0 here. We have this clipping. But let's apply this high cut down to like, 5 kilohertz. The top end is rolled off, but that clipping is still there because this is not a solution for digital clipping, but it is a solution for digital harshness, and I'll show you. Back to our A/B test here, I have an amp that is the Jazz Rivet. I have it mic'd up like this. I have this switch here taking our high cut from completely off down to 4.7 kilohertz. And so we're gonna hear the difference in the sound. So this is what we heard earlier. Now you might think, well, there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe coming through these, by the time you hear it through YouTube, maybe you don't really hear it. But in my experience, I hear yes, I hear the overdrive, but on top of that overdrive, I don't really hear clipping, but I hear this this fizziness. So the way to clear that up is to apply a high cut. Already that sounds so much more natural. I brought it down to, like I said, 4.7, and I think that's a good spot for this amp. Now I'm gonna go to other preset here where I have a different amp. It's the AC30. I will say that not all the amp models are created equal. Some of these struggle with this fizziness more than others, and I just picked two. You can go do your homework and play and figure out which ones do this to you, which ones sound better. I feel like this is one of the ones in the past that I felt like I struggled with. I like the AC Fawn more than the AC30 model in here, but let's try it. I applied an even stronger high cut to this 3.2. I think that sounds much more natural. Now, I will say, our ears are a lot like our eyes. When we go into, let's see, for example, a movie theater in the middle of the day. We're in the movie theater, it's nice and dark, our eyes adjust, we see the movie, it's really dark in there, and then the movie's over, you're let out, you open the big doors, and it's like, whoa, it's blinding. That's because our eyes have taken time to adjust to the darkness of the room that we were in. Well, the same is true with our ears. Once we are exposed to certain frequencies for a while, our ears tend to get used to that frequency, and then when we cut things out, it may sound muffled. So like you may be hearing something when I don't have the cut on to when I do have the cut on. It may sound like it's behind a wall or something. And I think part of the problem is we get so used to the sharpness of these digital modelers that when we do apply some high cuts, we think that it doesn't sound good. But let me do a test with you. So we have the high cut off. And if you get used to hearing that for a while, this might sound muffled to you. But let me do a test where we bring this high cut like down even further. What if we just take it all the way down? This would be super muffled. I want you to try this on your own, but when I start increasing this high cut, then the first one that might have sounded muffled to you is gonna sound normal. Just bring it up a little bit. Now here's the 3.2. See, coming from that dark muffled sound, this already sounds normal. Nice and clear, I hear all the top end. And it sounds authentic. Now let me take that high cut off, and I think we'll hear now this digital harshness. I don't like it. Now I did want to show you that not all high cuts are the same. That's why I brought in this other block here. If we were to put the high cuts the same on the cab as we do like an EQ high cut block, this was at 3.2. Let's bring this one down to 3.2 and we'll compare the two. So this is 3.2 on the cab. Take that off and turn the block on. 3.2 high cut, kilohertz high cut on the block is different because there's a chart I've seen on some other videos where the low cut and the high cut block is a little bit more extreme. It's still cutting at the same point, but the curve is more extreme, and the ones on the cab are less extreme. So I would move this back up to like 4.6 or something like that. I think if I were to A/B that might sound a little more equal. right, so the last thing I want to say is that another principle to follow as you're making presets, as you're creating tone for live use, tend to go darker rather than brighter, especially with these modelers, because we want to avoid that fizziness. We want to avoid any clipping for sure, but tend to go darker. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow you to play at louder volumes without it feeling like it's too loud. So for example, what I mean by this is as we play in church a lot of times we get people complaining like, hey, the music's too loud, I can't hear. And what they're probably saying is that it's not necessarily that it's too loud, it's that there's a frequency that is really bothering them. And I get that. That happens a lot. When the mix isn't right, it's like, oh, that's just hitting my ear just wrong. Most of the time it's not because the volume is so loud, it's just that that frequency isn't dialed in properly. The same can be true with our guitar. If we don't have any of these cuts on, we have that digital harshness, that fizziness, it can sound harsh, and so the person in the front of house mixer engineer is going to probably bring you down a little bit because you're cutting through too much. It's too present. And so I found that making my presets darker allows me to get a more full sound, allows the volume to come up without being too harsh. And so that's a principle to follow. The problem is when we're making presets alone in a room, we tend to like the full sound. We like everything we want to act like a keyboard player where we have the full frequency, but our guitar is supposed to fit in a mix and it needs to stay in its lane. And I'm telling you, if you follow this principle, keep your presets dark, don't slam your non-linear effects with too much volume, too much output. Make sure you avoid the clipping. Make sure your presets have the appropriate cuts. And they're all different. Different amps for different cuts. Different pickups might have and need different cuts on them. Dial in your sound, use your cuts, and I'm telling you, you're gonna be better for it. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like down below. Share any other comments or valuable things that you've learned using the Helix. I love this Hey Worship Leader community to actually be a community to resource each other. So I really appreciate you guys watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.